Could you tell me a bit about POC Isle of Man, who you are and what you do?
POC Isle of Man is a voluntary organisation that was formed nearly about a year ago now. It was prompted by the death of George Floyd and the BLM walk or march that had been organised. And we started to realise that people were scared of having the conversation about race and about what racism was and how it impacted our society. And there were a lot of people that actually thought it didn't exist on the Isle of Man at all, which as a group and as a community we knew wasn't true. And we thought that, well, the best way to do it is to create a non-judgmental platform where people could come and ask questions. We could do workshops, put out media, graphics, loads of resources that we've created or that we have seen in other areas that work really well. And that's kind of how it was formed. And one of our main focuses is really about education and pushing education through. So not just at like a school level and getting kids to think about different people and having differences and different communities, but going through high school and getting them to think about it in a more nuanced way, and definitely kind of bringing in, well, is it okay to say certain words? Is it okay to not stand up for it if you see racism happening? Is it okay to just kind of let it slip away and not really say anything? But also education in the community. So with our police force, for example, we've done workshops with them, we've done it with teachers, we are in talks with kind of Tynwald and government separately to kind of get that conversation going and kind of seeing, well, how can we best educate our population?
So, as we look towards election year and how the people of colour feel represented in Parliament, what does the situation look like at the minute?
So the thing about POC Isle of Man is everyone that is kind of on the core committee or in our wider community do have links to the Isle of Man. And that's kind of why we want to make sure that our population and our community get it right when talking about racism, and we were open. And in terms of representation, I mean, if, for example, you weren't someone that was white and looked at our current Tynwald or our current parliament, would you feel represented? Would you feel that there were people that understood your background or your culture, your community, the way it interacts with each other? Would you feel comfortable? And it's not just about people from different races or people from different cultures, but people with different sexual orientations, people that have different beliefs, people that maybe have a disability, whether or not that's something you can see or whether or not it's something that's hidden. If you were part of those communities, if you looked at our Tynwald, do you think you would feel represented? It depends on the person that you're speaking to, and there'll be some people that say, yeah, we do feel represented, we do feel that it's great, and there'll be other people that would maybe say, no, we don't. So if you're thinking about age, for example, I could imagine people in high school would look at Tynwald and go, they're not going to understand what it's like to be a teenager now. They're not going to understand the issues that we have and the problems that we face or the things that we want for our future. So I think it's really important that with respects to an election year, that we really do think about all of the different communities on the Isle of Man and how we can best represent that. And obviously we can't get one person from every single community on the Isle of Man sitting on Tynwald, because we would just have more politicians than I think we have the need for. But you can get people that maybe represent different communities at the same time, or are able to put themselves in other people's shoes, and just opening up a bit more, I think, would be really, really great for the whole community.
Why is it important then that people see themselves represented?
Well, I think that everyone wants to feel represented, and everyone wants to feel like the country that they're living in and the people making the decisions that impact their life are going to have understood what really impacts their life and the struggles that they may have gone through, understood their community and maybe their relationships and the way they interact with each other as well. It really does help with the trust of Parliament and Tynwald, because if you feel that people really don't understand and they're just making decisions based on the life that they've had, and there's not really a lot of differences, or there's not a lot of variety in the life and the background of people that are sitting and making these decisions for you, you don't really feel like you can trust them to make the right decision, or the one that is going to help a community move forward as a community, rather than just a, isolated group of people. And I think that that's what it's really about. It's creating that trust, and it's creating that bond with your population and your constituents, that actually you do have their best interests at heart, and it's not a game, it's not just politics. You are thinking about the everyday person.
Do you think people from minority communities who may not feel represented in Parliament, are they likely to cast a vote? Are they engaged with Manx politics?
I'm not sure. So I think that the younger population on the Isle of Man is so incredible, and they are definitely on it, and definitely are engaged in politics, and want to be involved, and kind of want to vote and get people voting. And I think that that's really interesting, because across the world we've seen an uptake in younger demographics being more interested in politics, being wanting to drive change and push change forward. And I think that that's come back to the Isle of Man. But we, in my opinion, we do kind of have this very island mentality that nothing's going to change and it doesn't matter. And that's not true, because if every person that said nothing's going to change voted, it would have a huge impact on who is actually sitting up there and, making the decisions, and who's actually part of our parliament. So I can speak from personal experience, and I'm interested in Manx politics, and I'm interested in, global politics, and I would be engaged to a certain point, and I would definitely be voting, but I'm not sure if I can say that for everyone. I mean, I know people that are interested, but not interested enough to vote, interested, but not so taken by it that they're going to keep up with every political decision that's being made, or every kind of new thing that's come out, or every piece of legislation that's come out, or anything. They're interested, but not in-depthly interested. And I think that part of that, and a large part of it, is actually because it doesn't seem very accessible to the wider community on the island. Manx politics don't seem very accessible. It seems very much like a little club that you kind of have to be part of, or you're not part of. And if you're not part of it, then you're like, oh, it's not going to matter. So why am I even investing the time and the effort into this? And I think that hopefully with the upcoming election, that's something that can change.
How can that change?
One of the main ways would be getting people from different communities and different areas and different backgrounds to stand, and to really have that conversation, and to really start those conversations. The issue with that is, when people stand, you just get this flurry of people making judgments and comments, and the Manx rumor mill starts, and everything just goes on, and the people that are standing just get so much of negative social media comments and negative in-person comments, and it impacts your life so much that you're kind of taken aback by it, and you stop focusing on what's actually important and what's the point of why you're standing, and instead you're finding yourself having to combat all of these different ideas of you and all of these different comments about you. And so I think that that's going to be a real big challenge for people wanting to stand. But I think that one of the main reasons we can change the way Manx politics is seen is getting people from different communities and different backgrounds to stand, and to talk about those things, to talk about why they're pushing, why those things are important to stand. So if you're standing because you feel that there needs to be more representation of a certain group of people, if that is something that's important to you, make that known, understand why, put it in a context of, yes, I'm standing because this is important to me, but this is how I will be able to understand what's important to you, because I know what it feels like to be someone who's marginalized, or I know what it feels like to be someone who doesn't feel represented. And it's staying with what's important to you, but also showing how your experience and your life has kind of worked in a way where you've got transferable skills, in the sense that you can not just be able to do the job, but you can understand people from different backgrounds. So you're not just going to be someone that's going to, if, for example, I was standing as someone that was Muslim, I'm not standing, just, but if it was, and I was someone that was Muslim, that to me is something that is very much part of my life and very much part of who I am. It doesn't mean that I'm always going to be pushing forward a Muslim agenda or anything like that. But I can understand how certain laws or certain rules can affect other people. So I can understand that why should, I've been judged on my religion or my race, and that wasn't fair. Therefore, you wouldn't want someone to be judging someone else on their sexual orientation or to be judging someone else on their socioeconomic background. And because you've been through something, I think it's important to you, and you can put yourself in other people's shoes a little bit easier. And I think that that's, if candidates want to stand, it's something, things that are important to them is something that should be part of their manifesto, and not just I'm standing because I want to see more representation. What does more representation mean? How is it going to impact the community? And how are you going to stand for not just the group of people that you are representing, but also how are you going to push for the wider community as well? How does those skills that you've learned as part of being that part of that community allow you to be empathetic to a larger population?
You are speaking from a bit of experience, of course. You stood to be an MLC, a member of the Legislative Council, Tynwald's Upper House, a few years ago.
Yes, so a little bit of personal experience. And while that was, one of the toughest things I think I've ever had to do, it was definitely eye-opening, and it was definitely an experience that was not good, but it was a huge learning experience for me. And I learned about myself.
Why wasn't it good?
I think just the instant judging was awful. It wasn't great. It was thought that I wasn't Manx enough to be able to stand or be part of Parliament. That's another thing that is difficult when you consider the Isle of Man to be home, and you have grown up here and you've been to school here, you've went off to uni, come back, decided to make it your home, and then for random people who don't know you to be saying, is she really Manx enough, or are they really Manx enough to be standing? What makes them think that they can understand the Manx population? And I was like, well, I'm part of the Manx population, that's why. And why is it okay for people to do, to see diversity in any form, not just in race, but why is it okay to see diversity in other jobs but not in ones that are making decisions? And that was kind of something that was really pushed forward. And I think I did have rose-colored glasses about how it was going to go and how it was going to be, or how I was going to be received. And kind of standing did really shatter that image. And I don't mean to say this to dissuade anyone for standing, because I think it's really important, but you do have to be prepared for the worst, because you don't know if the worst is going to come up. And yeah, I mean, that wasn't a good experience. And I think one of the other things was why I'm so passionate about people actually talking about their background, and why it makes such a difference, is that I was actively discouraged from talking about my background by, certain people. And so for me, it kind of put a cap on how authentic I felt I could be, because I was very much dissuaded from talking about why standing as a person of color would be important, or why standing as someone that is a different religion from Christianity or not atheist is important. And one of the things that really, really did upset me was the lack of understanding of how that makes you a person. And it was interesting because there were, a wide range of candidates standing for MLC. And I think that there was such a variety that obviously it was going to be difficult. And there was such an amazing opportunity to get different perspectives on board and get different ideas on board and get some fresh eyes as well, which I think is quite often overlooked. And I know that people say that they want people that have experience, but if you're getting someone that's got loads and loads of experience, that also comes with the fact that they know how to play the game. And does that mean that they're really going to be able to are they going to be able to be honest about the decisions they're making? Or is it going to sometimes have to be about politics and playing politics? Whereas if you get someone that doesn't really have experience in politics, I know that means there's other issues in terms of understanding how things work and understanding the rules and stuff, but that's stuff that you can learn. And that's stuff that I think everyone will have to learn. And because things are changing, everyone's going to have to relearn. But if you're getting someone that maybe doesn't have as much experience or is quite new to politics, you're getting someone with completely fresh eyes to sit and go, well, actually, that may be the way that it's always done, but that makes no sense whatsoever. Why don't we try and do it this way? And I think that that's really important as well, is that just because someone doesn't necessarily have experience in politics doesn't make them a bad candidate. It gives the candidate an opportunity to look at what's going on and maybe understanding, the background behind Tynwald or the background behind Parliament or politics, and explaining it to their constituents in a way that is more accessible to the wider population, in a way that's not political speak, so to say, but in layman's terms. And I think being able to take information from a really specific field and then being able to get a wide range of audiences to understand it is a really important quality. And if someone's coming from a background where they don't necessarily they don't have all this experience about politics, and they're going into a situation where they are a politician now, they have to figure out ways of kind of getting the information that's said back to their community and back to their constituents in a way that they understand it. And so the level of transparency, I think, goes up, because you're kind of going, well, they're going to be honest with me, and they're not going to say things in a way that's going to confuse me. They're not going to give me like a politician's answer or anything like that. They're actually going to maybe give me an answer, or they're going to maybe help me understand why things have gone this way. And I think so a lack of experience within politics is not always a bad thing, because it can have some very, very good points. I mean, you can bring in a fresh pair of eyes, and completely fresh, and someone that, doesn't have ties to it or doesn't have know-how of what's meant to be said or what should be said, but instead what they feel passionate about.
Are there any issues that you think all candidates should be discussing, whatever community they're from, in this year's election?
I definitely think we should be looking at our curriculum. And I think that from a POC IOM perspective, we would love to have a say into what's in our curriculum and the histories behind it. I think that education is always something that candidates should be looking at, and healthcare is something. So those are things that I'm passionate about, but I think that they are very much important. And if you look at the pandemic and what we've gone through, education has been so important. And we've really, I think, as an island and as a global community, seen the importance of schools and teachers and having proper education, and how much that impacts our kids, and how much it impacts our younger population. So I think education is always something that they should be looking at. Health and social care, again, how much have we relied on the Department of Health and Social Care throughout the pandemic, when everything kind of closed down? How much did we rely on them? And I think as well, business, so local businesses, how to support local businesses. And also the Isle of Man is in a unique position that we have quite a lot of international business over here on such a small island, and you wouldn't really think that'd be that much. But how do we keep businesses here, and how do we welcome them to the island as well? So if we're saying we're this international hub for business or for finance or whatever it is, are we actually an international hub? Are people gonna want to open a business here and kind of want to stay here? And local businesses as well, because I mean, they've been really, really hit with the pandemic, and a lot of small businesses on the island, sometimes from people that I've spoken to, business owners on the island, sometimes feel that it's difficult to compete with bigger businesses. So I think those are definitely three of the topics that I would like to see candidates focusing on.
Just to pick up on education that you talked about there, what sorts of elements of education do you think it's important for people to talk about?
I think it's definitely important to talk about the impact that education has on the island and further afield. And I think as well, the importance of teachers and the importance of educators from that perspective. But then from the education perspective, I think what would be really, really good would be understanding that there are different issues. So there are different issues that are coming into play with the younger generation. And so in terms of safeguarding and protecting kids, what is really important and what not what's important right now, but also what's going to be important 10 years in the future or 5 years in the future, at the end of, the term of politicians that we have that are going to be coming in at the end of this year. What's going to be important when they leave? What are kids going to be thinking about? And what are the situations that they're going to really need help in? And in terms of preparing our young population for life outside of the island, I think a lot of kids or a lot of people I went to school with were unprepared about what it meant to live in the UK and what it meant to kind of move off the island, because the Isle of Man is such a unique place and I don't think there's anywhere like it. Even if you're going across the way to Liverpool, it's such a different experience and it's such a different community, and I don't think that we are properly prepared through education to be able to deal with that. And I think that that really does play a huge part in people's mental health and their mental well-being. In terms of schools, I definitely want to see better safeguarding or safeguarding issues, approaches on bullying, because bullying is obviously changing. It's, may not be so much in person, but a lot of it happens online. And even though that cyberbullying is something that's not really, it's not condoned, but it's happening a lot more, especially, in the time of coronavirus, where all of school has been online and all of school has really been, kids are interacting with other kids on social media. And so any interaction that they have is through a screen. It's increasing and people feel so comfortable behind a screen to be able to just say whatever without consequences. I think that we should be looking at legislation in terms of, again, with kids, but also with adults, what constitutes hate crimes. So I know that we don't have hate crime law here, so legally there's nothing to back you up, and I know that there's people looking into that, but I think that again would be something that I would think people would want to be focusing on, because it doesn't just serve one community, it serves many communities that don't feel protected or safe or backed up by law. And I think in schools as well, if something was said because of your sexual orientation or because you had a disability or because you were a different ethnicity, is sometimes still considered bullying, but I think it's a much larger issue than just bullying someone. It kind of stems from something a lot deeper, and I would really like to see a little bit more focus on maybe what schools can do about that.